tonight I wanted to dive into one of the most intense aspects that I've been noticing that you may be seeing or feeling or experiencing on a global scale. And that is that Mars, which is the planet of action, it's the planet of leadership, it's the planet of energy. It's the planet that fires us up to get out of bed in the morning. It's the planet that encourages us to go forwards. It's the planet of pushing the gas pedal all the way down and going forwards. Has been and is currently retrograde and has been retrograde since December 5th. Now, what does retrograde mean? A lot of you may have heard of Mercury retrograde. Anyone heard of Mercury retrograde? But very few people have probably ever heard of Mars retrograde. And so, what does that mean? How may that be affecting you individually? How may it be affecting our communities? And how may it be affecting the world? Just so you know, Mars will be retrograde until February 23rd. And so we have about 20 days from today to deal with kind of what the energy of retrograde means. And so just like when Mercury is retrograde, it's a time of dealing with things from the past. It's a time where things from the past may come up for resolution, may come up to be shifted, may come up to be cleared or transformed. And so when you think about the energy of Mars, Mars likes to go forwards now. It is not an energy that likes to be restrained. It's not an energy that wants to stop. It's not an energy that wants to pause. And so when Mars changes its connection to the Earth, and what does retrograde even mean? So imagine for a moment that all the planets are set to run a race. Okay, so they're all lined up. Got the Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. They're all lined up to run a race. And so imagine the Earth is running alongside them. We're running this race. Everything's about equal. And then all of a sudden, Mars slows down a little bit in its orbit. Now the Earth turns around to look back at Mars. And now Mars appears to be going backwards, but it is not actually. It's just the appearance, right? It's the perspective. And as we know, perspective can change everything. And so right now on the Earth, the planet Mars is currently retrograde, seeming to move backwards compared to the Earth. This will be in effect until February 23rd. So this is very exciting. Now, I really felt called to create this video because we're at the start of a new year. We're at the start of take action time, right? The new year, the new you, take new action. It's also the beginning of the Celtic spring. It's the first day yesterday. So there's an energy of newness and new beginnings and an energy to go forwards. But the planet that governs going forwards, the planet of energy, the planet of get up and go, Mars, the planet of the divine masculine, is retrograde since December 5th until February 23rd. So let's dive in a little bit. Let me show you here. We're going to bring up Stellarium. We're going to look at the actual sky so I can show you the planet Mars, and we can get a sense of how this might be affecting you, how this might be affecting us, how this might be affecting the world. And it will be a very powerful tool and guide for any of you who are out there trying to figure out what's up with the energy right now, right? What is up with the energy? Like, it's very different than normal. And I think I saw a reel today showcasing an astrologer, a psychic, and a witch. And it said something like 2025, they're all in agreement that crazy stuff is going on, right? And so part of that energy is Mars can also be called the god of war. And when you have the god of war retrograde, it means that things from the past, conflicts from the past, disagreements from the past, arguments, anger from the past, things related to leadership from the past may be coming up. Things may be taken action on that were not taken action on before. And so it is a time where past things related to energy, action, and leadership, conflict, anger, and disputes may be coming up from the past for each of us, for our collective, and for the government and the world. That means disputes. Right now we have this big dispute, right, between the US, Canada, Mexico, China with these tariffs. We have this border patrol issue. And so Mars is the energy, the planet of leadership. It's the energy of going forwards, and it's retrograde. And so much stuff from our past, from the government's past, from our individual lives may be coming up to the surface to be addressed. Now, this is not a super easeful, effortless, pleasant sort of thing. Mars is kind of an in your face, grabs your attention, and you got to pay attention because it's strong energy. So I'm going to share a screen with you. We're going to go check out where Mars is actually at. When a planet retrograde, that means that it goes back. And so it goes back into the sign before it. And of course, I share True the Stars astrological information based on what's actually happening in the stars right now. And so Mars was in the sign of Cancer right around December 5th. And here's the constellation of Cancer right here. But it has now traveled into the sign of Gemini. Gemini. Well, what's Gemini all about? Gemini is known as the twins. You can see Castor and Pollux here. And so last night and over the last several nights, I've been going outside and staring up at the sky and seeing how Mars is making somewhat of a triangle shape with Castor and Pollux, with the twins. And so I was thinking, well, if Mars is retrograde and Mars is action energy, leadership energy, can be conflict energy, can be anger, and it's going backwards, which means it's bringing up to the surface things that have not been addressed related to conflict, related to leadership, related to taking action. This can relate to our leadership energy. How have we not taken leadership energy action in the past? Therefore, it's being addressed right now. It's being brought to the surface. And so there's Mars up in the sky, and it's glowing red. If you go outside tonight, I really invite you to go look for Mars because it's very bright right now. And it's currently in the constellation of Gemini. And I thought, well, what is Gemini all about? And this is really interesting because Gemini is very similar to the energy of Mercury. And so many of us are familiar with Mercury, right? Mercury is all about, can affect travel plans, it affects communication plans, it can affect our movement from one place to another. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting because I've been hearing about car crashes. Of course, on the news, there's a horrendous airplane crash where so many people lost their lives. Is tragic. And so very interesting that Mars, the planet of action, is in the sign of travel. It's in the sign of movement from point A to point B. It's in the sign of communication, and it's retrograde, which means that it's not functioning at its optimal. It's not its happy place, right? It's not the energy Mars is used to. Mars wants to go forwards. Retrograde is all about the past. And so it's not the most helpful, empowering energy for forward movement. It's much more opportune time to deal with things that you didn't do right the first time when it comes to leadership, right? Resolving your past habits with action, setting up a game plan, getting prepared for when Mars goes forward, right? And that's where you can really put the action in, right? Going through your papers and going through your projects and getting clear. What do I want to take action on? What do I want to move forwards on? And so I was checking out Mars is in Gemini, and it's in Gemini retrograde until February 23rd. So I wanted to dive in a little bit into the energetic of Gemini to give you a little more clarity of what that might mean having Mars in Gemini and retrograde until February 23rd, just in case you're someone who's been wondering, like many, what is going on in the world? Why aren't things necessarily working out as smoothly or as effortlessly or as easily as I know that they could? So, what is Mars and Gemini all about? All right. So we've got a great depiction of Mars energy. Of course, Mars is the divine masculine. It's that raw, powerful energy of the leader, of the warrior, of the hero, charging forwards, taking action, right? It's that strong masculinity. And currently, Mars is retrograde until February 23rd. And so, what sign is it retrograde in, and how might that be affecting us? So, communication. Gemini, right? So we have the masculine planet, Mars, the action planet, the leadership-oriented planet in the sign of communication, of expression, of sharing information. And what is communication? That can be social media, that can be the mail, that can be phone calls, that can be you and I having a conversation. Gemini is the social butterfly. Um, it's the speaker on the stage. It's the writer. It's the person who takes one piece of information and then shares it out with the world. Okay. And so Mars in Gemini is all about communication, communication, communication. This can be social networking, marketing, any form of communication. It's all about the sharing of that information. And so that very interesting. There's a strong energy of action and a strong energy of communication, and it's all retrograde, which means dealing with things from the past. And so this invites us to slow down and to take a look at our own past of leadership and communication. Is there anyone we still need to communicate with? Is there any area of our lives that we need to take more action on, that we need to take a step up, where we need to step more into that leadership role? So Mars retrograde really invites us and asks us to dial into that and to dive into that more fully. Now, as I was tuning into this, Mars Gemini, I was looking up at Stellarium and I was seeing, of course, Mars situated right in the constellation of Gemini. It occurred to me to look up what is Gemini all about. And so I did a little bit of research and it's very interesting. So I'm going to share it with you. And to me, felt like it could kind of begin to describe why things a little bit strange. So in Babylonian astrology or astronomy, the stars Castor and Pollux, which are the two twins of Gemini, were known as the Great Twins. The twins were regarded as minor gods and were called Meshlamtea and Lugarla, meaning respectively the one who has arisen from the underworld and the mighty king. Both names can be understood as titles of Nergal, the major Babylonian god of plague and pestilence, who is king of the underworld. And so in ancient Babylonian astrology, Gemini, or the twins, takes on a little bit more of a sinister quality. And those of you who have studied astrology before may be familiar with the sign Scorpio or the planet Pluto. And so as I was tuning into the energy of Gemini, I was getting the sense that perhaps there's a deeper, darker meaning to the twins, which is typically known as more of a light air sign than we realized. And so I wanted to dive into this a little bit more deeply. So I then went on to discover even more information, which I thought was very interesting about the history of Gemini and the twins. And so I'll share that with you here. The history of Gemini. So if we go back to the Babylonian era, right? Gemini is known as the god of the underworld, which is very interesting. And then if we go forward a little bit, we come to the Greek mythology of Gemini. And even there's somewhat of a darker quality. So, first of all, Gemini is a mutable sign, which means that it's affected by other energies. It's not super strong in its own right. It tends to kind of blow more with the wind as an air sign. And it is situated right at the time of the summer solstice around June 21st. That is when Gemini occurs. That's when the sun is in Gemini. Right now, Mars is in the end of Gemini. The word Gemini is a Latin word for twins and is one of the constellations that actually looks like its name would suggest. So it looks like two people. The first known reference of the Gemini constellation was in Aristotle's Meteorologica over 300 years ago BC. He mentions that he observed an occulting star in Gemini and speaks of observing Jupiter in conjunction with it. In Babylonian astronomy, right, which goes back even further, these stars were known as the Great Twins and regarded as minor gods. One, the one who has arisen from the underworld, and Lugarlia, the mighty king. So what does this mean? Okay. The myth of Gemini. This is where it starts to get really interesting because back in the Babylonian era, which is actually where basically the root of all astrology began, Gemini was not seen as a light-hearted, easeful, fun, flirty, communicative sign. It was known as the god of the underworld, one of them, and the mighty king. And so it shows this great polarity. So one of the twins was known as the mighty king, which could be seen as more bright and light. And then the other twin was known as the god of the underworld. So we have this great polarity happening in this constellation where Mars is situated right now. Okay, so the myth of Gemini is a myth of Castor and Pollux, who are the sons of Zeus, who is the major king of Mount Olympus, and Leda. Leda was the wife of Tyndarus, king of Sparta. So it says that Leda got seduced or raped by Zeus, the king of the gods, who was disguised as a swan. As a result, she hatched 2 eggs from which 4 children were born, mortal and immortal, for they have different fathers, and among them Castor and Pollux. Castor was the mortal twin brother, and Pollux was immortal. They never fought and loved each other very greatly. Okay. However, Pollux was known for his boxing skills, Castor as a horse tamer. Okay. Okay. So they ended up having a feud over a woman, and Zeus gave a choice to Pollux to spend every day as an immortal at Mount Olympus among the gods, or give half of his immortality to his brother Castor. So the twins were given a choice. One of them's immortal, one of them's mortal. And Zeus offered to give full immortality to one of them, or he could give half of his immortality to his brother. So, of course, Pollux, loving his brother, gave half of his immortality to his brother. And so the twins shared life and death, spending a day at Mount Olympus together, followed by a day at Hades, the underworld. Okay. So very, very, very interesting how in both the Babylonian astrology and if you go back to the mythology of Gemini, in traditional astrology, if you were to look up what Gemini means, it's all about communication, information, sharing information. It's very logical. It's very lighthearted. It's fun. They tend to have trouble committing because there's 2 of them, 2 sides of the coin. But if you go back farther, and I'm really diving into this because Mars is situated right between them right now. And Mars, of course, is action and energy and leadership. It can relate to those who are in power. It can relate to the leaders of the land. It can relate especially to the masculine leaders of the land. And it's also known as the god of war in ancient mythology and can relate to aggression, anger, conflict, and separation, which I don't know about you, but it feels like that's happening on a very large scale in our world right now. And so I felt very compelled to share this information, to invite us to bring more compassion, bring more forgiveness, bring more understanding into ourselves and into the world around us right now. Because with Mars being in such an active, energizing role of activating the polarity, since it's in Gemini, of the light and the dark, retrograde, diving into things from the past related to ways that we or the leaders of our land or the government have taken action, or ways that they have communicated or shared information. There's a lot of change happening both in the leadership of the land and in the media. Those would be the key things that I would say would be highlighted with Mars in Gemini retrograde. Issues that have been in the leadership of the land and issues in the communication and the media of the land. Retrograde from the past. So issues from the past related to the news, the media, and the leadership of the land are going to be being brought up at very high levels between now and February 23rd as Mars completes its retrograde period, stations direct, and then will go forwards again after that. So imagine by March 1st, March 7th, the energy of action, of leadership, of the media, a lot of stuff is going to get cleaned out and cleared out. And it's going to be a much more forward moving, activated time where it's going to be easier to think about leadership. It's going to be easier to take action. It's going to be easier to think because Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, which is communication and thought and logic and the mind. And so it's going to be much easier to think and move forwards and be more rational. And so I wanted to give you this update so you could know that Mars is affecting these areas and arenas of course, knowing where you have Mars and Gemini retrograde can be very helpful for you in terms of knowing what and how it might be affecting your life and things that you can do to assist yourself during this time to still take action, to still be a leader, to still claim the leadership energy, but by being aware of how the planet might be affecting you or the collective or those around you, it may be very helpful in terms of making plans or setting up assignments for yourself so that you can win and be more successful. So there's a lot more I could dive into and talk about the fact that the sun is in Capricorn, Mercury is in Capricorn, the sign of government, business, and structure, the fact that some really important planets are about to go direct that relate to finances and wealth, and that this year could well be set to be one of the biggest financial win zones of 2025. So I have a lot more to share with you. I'm really excited about this year. Don't let the intensity or the appearance of strife fool you. When a planet is retrograde, it just means that a lot of crap from the past is being brought up to the surface to be cleared. And so be as present and aware and allow the stuff to come up and out of you, up and out of the collective to transmute, to transform, and get excited about what it's going to be like, what it's going to feel like when the density, the intensity, and all of the trauma and drama of leadership stuff, communication stuff from the past that hasn't been dealt with finally gets cleared. And then you can step forwards being more clear, more in tune, more aware, and ready for what this year, 2025, and its incredible wealth activation holds. I'm so excited for my next video to share with you what that is going to bring. If this is affecting you, just know what is this bringing up for me? How can I clear it? How can I confront it? How can I transform it? And then imagine what it's going to feel like on the other side of the coin once it's clear and once your energy is moving forwards again. So, if you'd like to know where Mars in Gemini is in your chart and how this might be affecting you or how 2025 might be affecting you, I just edited my website. I have lots of new offerings for 2025, and I am excited to assist you with getting clarity from the stars. It's true. It's based on where the stars actually are. Please like, follow, subscribe, join my community, and I send you biggest love for let's make 2025 a peaceful, prosperous, and beautiful year. Biggest love. Aloha.